Welcome to Season 4 of the Art of Teaching podcast. I'm Matthew Green and I'm so grateful that you joined me today. Before we get started, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to all of you that have subscribed, listened and reviewed the episodes. I really do appreciate you taking the time. In this week's episode of the Art of Teaching podcast, I had the pleasure of interviewing the phenomenal Bec West and Stephen Kolber. These two incredible educators have been named in the top 50 finalists for the 2021 Global Teacher Prize. Bec is a school leader in southwestern Sydney and is known for creating educational videos on her YouTube channels Clever Pickles and Talkin Chalk. Stephen publishes teaching content online on his YouTube channel, Mr. Kolber's Teaching, for other teachers and students to use. He is a regular podcast guest and is passionate about building communities that share best practice. It was a pleasure to interview both of these incredible educators. I hope that you get as much out of this interview as I did. Bec and Stephen, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time. It's 8 o'clock at night. The kids are in bed and you could be doing anything else other than talking to me. So I'm incredibly grateful. Bec, where are you phoning in from?
My bedroom.
That's in Sydney, obviously.
Yes, I'm in southwest Sydney, which up until recently was one of the hottest of hot spots. I work and live in the hot spot. So I work in the Fairfield region and live in the Campbelltown region. So only up until a week ago was I actually allowed to pretty much go anywhere beyond my house.
Wow. And Stephen, you're phoning from Melbourne?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Whereabouts? It's a beautiful part of the world.
I'm in Glenroy at the moment, so it's an exciting time to be alive in Glenroy. We're also rather hot to jump on Bec's comment as well. Masks are a fashion statement we're not making around my area. Let's put it that way.
Look, it is what it is. People are just getting through this time. So incredibly grateful that you would have a chat to me today. So I know it's coming towards the end of the day, but Stephen, what's your coffee order when I can finally fly down to Melbourne and buy your coffee?
So I would be getting a milkshake and a juice. That's my go-to. You got to have both options.
Not together. Surely milk and juice.
Well, you space them out, spaced repetition, but no, you got to have both. Definitely not coffee. I'm the least Melbourne person I know. I'm shocked. Juice and milkshake sounds like an interesting combination. Bec, I take it you don't have milk and juice for first thing in the morning?
No, not like that. No. My go-to before work is I stop at the local cafe. I go through the drive-through and I get a skim hazelnut latte and I get it served extra hot because there's no way I'm going to get the time to drink it as soon as I walk in on site. It usually needs to be microwaved at some point in the morning. I do, however, like to drink tea and I like some flavored teas as well. So usually it's coffee in the morning and then teas throughout the rest of the day.
Nice. Interesting. Bec, what is an item that is still on your bucket list?
I want to go and stay in one of those overnight clear igloo dome things under the Northern Lights. I think they're in the Netherlands or in Finland, somewhere like that. I definitely want to go and do that. I don't know when that'll happen. Maybe like in a million years after COVID is all done.
Yeah. What about you, Stephen? Is it to leave Melbourne or are you thinking sort of beyond that?
No, yeah. I've stopped planning long ago. So I've scaled back my ambitions. It's just to get out of Melbourne by car or by plane. I'm not fussed.
Fantastic. I mean, that's a good lesson, isn't it? Just kids, reduce your expectations and scale down your ambition.
Less disappointment.
That's right, guys. It's been a whirlwind. I seem to be seeing your faces all over Twitter and Instagram, and for those people that are not aware, you've both been nominated as part of the Global Teacher Prize for Education. So congratulations. It's an incredible privilege, an incredible testimony to your expertise and your professionalism and what you have invested into a wonderful profession. But Stephen, what does it mean to be nominated as one of the top 50 teachers globally? It's an amazing achievement.
It's surprising. I think it's sort of, I don't know, I'm trying to claim it on behalf of Victoria as the first Victorian person to make the top 50.
Nice.
And I just think the amount of time that we spent remote learning, we deserve some sort of accolade. And this, I'm taking it on behalf of the state, if I'm allowed. But yeah, it's just been really wonderful. At this time, currently halfway through the holidays, I would normally be in Cambodia. So instead, as Bec will no doubt comment on, we've got our little WhatsApp with the top 50, many of the top 50 participants in there. So that's my little, my insight into what I would normally be doing, which is interacting with teachers from around the world. So that's been amazing. And sort of, yeah, it's just kind of, it's exciting to meet other people who are kind of as into education as I am. So it's kind of like, I'll say, I've been reading up on your profile to someone, and they'll say, here's my website with all the articles I've written. And I'm like, hey, here's my website with all the articles I've written. It's like, I didn't know there were other people who did that kind of garbage. So I'm like, it's exciting to connect with these sort of people that are going above and beyond. Yeah.
Awesome. What would you usually be doing in Cambodia at this time?
So we go over and we train teachers. So we sort of run week-long workshops, and we started about a decade ago. Took my wife there on our honeymoon to see if she'd survive. And 11 years later, she was the president. I'm the secretary. We're kind of, we're keeping it kicking. But yeah, working with Khmer teachers and the US teachers and Swedish teachers and doing teacher stuff full time.
Amazing. It sounds like an unusual honeymoon to go and in your break to go and teach people with your wife, but it's obviously must have been a really memorable experience.
Yeah, I'd recommend everyone try it once. If they survive, that's a good sign.
On your honeymoon, just try and change the world. That's a great idea.
I wasn't doing that on my honeymoon, but congratulations for investing in other people. I think that is amazing. Bec, what does it mean for you to be nominated? I follow your work really closely, but for those people that aren't aware of what you do, it might be worth spending a few moments talking about that as well, if you wouldn't mind.
So I think the reason that I got there was the work that I do, trying to share with educators. Well, my prime goal is obviously Australian teachers, but it's been established worldwide that it's been helping teachers. So to be listed amongst, the top 50 in the world is extremely exciting, and it's humbling as well to see all those other teachers and the wonderful things that they're doing. But I mean, it's also good to know that the effort and the energy and the time that we put into trying to help people in our industry is recognized, and it does help. Obviously, if it didn't help people, then it wouldn't be recognized in this way. And that's, the work that Stephen does as well, and working with teachers across other countries. The fact that we're not just focusing on our kids in our school. We understand that education is a global industry. It's not just within our systems. And that's why Stephen and I have collaborated before on teach meets and things like that. We know it's not our own little bubble that we stay in. We do better when we work together and share across our collective, ideas and strategies that we use. So I think I love the idea that I'm learning more by being part of this top 50. And yeah, the group that Stephen started with, the WhatsApp, so far, I'm already learning so much just from the photos that we share, or hearing about other people's projects and what they're doing. And just a couple of little things where you're like, oh, that's a good idea that I might steal, that might work in my context. But it's also being able to support others in their initiatives too, because, some people are on the ground trying to start something brand new. I'm very fortunate that I work at a school where I've got a supportive principal, amazing staff, and I work in a system that supports what I do. Not everyone around the world has that. So if we can all do what the Global Teacher Prize is meant to do, which is uplift teachers and recognize that we are highly educated, professionals with quality expertise, then that's what we can do for people around the world.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's so inspirational, like I said, to see teachers sharing that expertise not only across their school, but their school networks, and even more broadly, in both of your cases, globally, which I think is so important. Bec and Stephen, as it's a question to both of you, how on earth do you find the time? Because Bec, I know you have young children. Stephen, I'm not sure about you, but how on earth do you find the time to do this? Because schools and leadership, especially in schools, is pretty time consuming, but somehow you both carve space to take the time to invest in the much broader teacher community. So maybe we might throw to you first, Stephen. How do you find the time to do what you do? It's quite amazing.
Yeah, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. Every night I collapse in a pile, and one of my forthcoming interviews is about teacher well-being, and I'm like, I couldn't think of anyone worse to talk to. It's like, well, what I do is when I finish teaching, then I go and read research, and then I write research, and then I get on Twitter or I have some kind of online event, and then I collapse and look after baby, and then put him to bed, and then after that, then we kick back into gear as we are, right now, 8 o'clock with little ones that are to sleep, and rather than sleeping ourselves off, catching up on Z's, which would be, a lovely respite. We're kind of out here trying to communicate, collaborate, and sort of make teaching better, more public, more visible, more excellent, all those sort of things. I don't know how. It's fun. That's why you do it, right?
Yeah, I guess passion makes room, doesn't it? Because when something that you believe in so much, as we all do, with education and really making a difference, I think you just kind of find the time. What about you, Bec? How on earth do you do it? I mean, we've chatted before about kind of that balance between home life and school and the chaos that it can sometimes be, but somehow amongst your role within the school, you've also found time to record YouTube videos and to sit on panels and to run professional learning. And I thought I was productive, but I think you're putting me to shame. How do you have to do it?
I think my husband would probably have a different view about how much my work balance.
It would be great to have him on. Yeah.
I think that him in itself is one of the reasons I can do the things that I do. Yeah. He is a stay-at-home dad, so that automatically reduces, I guess, the responsibilities that would be put on me if he also worked, which, like, he is the cook. I never cook, which is fine because I'm terrible at it. So that works out fine. Little things like that. My kids are older now, so a lot of the house chores, they're learning to be independent. So on the weekend, when it's time to do washing, they're already putting the washing out. They're bringing it in, they're folding it up and putting it away. It's much easier now than what it was when they were younger, though. So when they were younger, I was burning at both ends. I was up past midnight, up at before 6 a.m. And we were living in the country at the time that they were that age, and I lived 1 minute away from where I worked. So that time that, normally would be spent commuting was just more work. It wasn't like I had more relaxation time, and somehow I just filled it up with more work. So I think over the years, though, I've gotten better at prioritizing what's most important. So this term, while we've been in lockdown, I have had to reduce how much content I'm putting out onto my Talkin Chalk YouTube channel. And I've had to prioritize the kids channel, the Clever Pickles channel, because that's what my kids have needed at school. And I've just had to go, that's the priority. I was able to maintain doing weekly podcasts with the team because I don't produce any of those. I literally turn up at the right time. I look through our notes and then I just talk about whatever I think will help people. So the fact that I'm not doing all of that back end stuff works for that. So I think the key is knowing, I guess, if we want to have an impact on things, how can we do that the most beneficial way? And the way that I found to do that is really sharing what's relevant in my context. I'm not seeking other things that aren't relevant to what I'm doing right now and adding to my workload. I'm just utilizing whatever is my workload to share with others. So when Stephen and I have done those teach meets and things before, it's been things that have been relevant to me. I didn't go, I want to go learn something new. I'm going to go research that and bring that to the table. I pick things that fit within my structure that I know I can do. And sometimes it means saying no to things. Like if I have been asked to do a panel or something like that, sometimes you have to say no and just be able to prioritize and learn what's most important about you. But, obviously for both of us, our most important thing would be our school and our students and our teachers that we work with, they always come first. I think the bigger part is I only realized recently, I think this stuff is like my hobby. Like, I don't really have any other hobbies. I do garden a little bit. I used to do dancing before I had kids, and I do like to go hiking as well. But I've realized, like, doing this stuff doesn't drain me. Like, it excites me. I actually get a lot of enjoyment out of doing it. So instead of, I don't know, being at the gym 24/7 or going swimming or something like other people do enjoy doing, and there's no, putting down on that, this is the kind of stuff that excites me. Like, I am reading those texts at night, like you, Stephen, as well. But like, I feel like I'm gaining stuff out of it.
It's both, my life is very much like that. It's both sad and inspirational at the same time.
Teaching, sad and inspirational.
Yeah. Once again, that we should put that on a t-shirt or a mug and distribute it around staff rooms. But it is like that, isn't it? It's a bit of an obsession. And in some ways, I know from my experience, it hasn't always been a healthy obsession. I think I've definitely had to learn how to kind of balance those things, and I'm incredibly fortunate. My wife is amazing, and also she's currently in the background listening to this. And she's from a family of teachers, and she gets what it takes to make a difference in the lives of young people, and it really is all-consuming. But what a privilege to get to stand in front of a group of leaders or stand in front of a classroom and help to mold and shape these little minds. It's something which I don't take for granted at all. But how on earth, Stephen, so we'll start with you and then maybe move on to Bec. How do you remain kind of endlessly curious? Because you're saying that you're constantly reading and consuming research, and you're flying off to other countries to help support teachers there. Like, how do you maintain that passion and that excitement for our profession, where in many ways people don't always do that? So how on earth do you do that, Stephen?
I don't know. I don't want to set myself up as some sort of exception or exceptionalism, but it's, I think learning as teachers, the thirst for me personally, like, I'm a learner before I'm a teacher always. And it's kind of, that's the process. For other people, it might be different. Like, it might be relationships first and then content second. But for me, it's always been learning first. And I'm by nature like a shy, withdrawn person, or I was before I started teaching, and that changed me very quickly in that respect. But yeah, like a quiet person sitting in a library reading a book kind of thing. And then I started to realize, after 5 or 6 years of teaching, like, the best part is once you find that knowledge, that new idea, that new thing, and then you present it to someone, and you have to think, what's the best way to meet them where they're at, but also communicate, the thing that I learned, which is exciting and powerful. And yeah, I don't know. I'm just excited hearing Bec talk, because it's like, totally agree. Like, the hardest question to be asked is like, oh yeah, this is cool. So like, what else do you do in education? And you're like, survive, subsist. You know what I mean? But yeah.
Stephen, I think that's such, and it's such a hard, and we talked a little bit about this off air, like teaching, and to talk about being great at teaching, which you obviously both are, is actually a really difficult thing, because it's such a selfless profession where you invest so much into other people, and then to turn around and say, yeah, I'm doing a good job, like, I think is really difficult because, like I said, because we invest so much into our students, and it's such a in many ways, it was such an incredible privilege to get to do what we do. But I think sometimes teachers are not great at saying the amazing job that they're doing. And it's lovely to see that people as experienced as both of you are still trying to kind of verbalize or even talk about the amazing work you do, because it's so much a part of who you are. I think is really, really, really lovely. How do you define, oh, sorry, Bec, well, I forgot what question I asked Stephen, but whatever it was, I think I might have.
Whatever it was, answer that too.
Yeah, I think I might have lost that thread. It's okay, it's late here, but what I might do, Bec, is I might...
how do you stay curious? That was the question.
That's right. How do you stay curious? Thank you,
curious. Yeah. Actually, that's a good thing in terms of professional learning I've done over the recent years. So professional learning is probably what keeps me curious. I like looking at those different opportunities for things that allow you to collaborate and network with other teachers, because that's when you get some of the best knowledge ever. And that's where I got to meet Stephen actually face to face, was at a professional learning at a conference in Melbourne where I was fortunate to go. If you ever meet this guy in person, he's very tall, guys. Don't be scared.
That was my strong memory of you too. I was like, hey, she's taller than she looks.
Yes, I never get to feel
in the
short.
video, Stephen, but it's yeah, you look very tall. I don't know. I didn't know if it was an angle that made you look taller, but it's good to know that in person you are
very tall. I think I sit under his armpit. Like, anyway.
I love that you know that somehow. Like, we actually tried it when we went to professional learning. Yeah. Sorry, Beck, what were you saying?
Well, engaging in that practice and being, because there'll be one person at your table that will have a different perspective or a different experience or idea about what you're doing that will make you go, huh. And I recently completed a course through New South Wales Department of Education called the Aspiring Principals Leadership Program. And it talks about the leadership mindsets, of which one is being curious. And it took us through all of this professional learning about how do we stay curious as lifelong learners, as educators, as leaders, as we keep going. So that's kind of stuck with me as I've continued beyond that course into future professional learning, which has now led me down training in emotional intelligence. And oh man, if you really want to be deep and meaningful and self-reflective and learn about yourself, go into emotional intelligence. But I think just professional learning so much, like no matter how much they change the curriculum, any one of us, we're professionals, we can read curriculum and understand it and learn what we're supposed to do in our job. We can all read policies and procedures and understand what we're meant to do. But it's in professional learning with our colleagues and with our networks that I think keeps us curious.
Yeah, really, really important. I couldn't agree more. And it's so lovely to see that people that are as experienced as you both are, that are still so curious and so excited about our wonderful profession. It's really wonderful to see. Like, even as, like, obviously people at home that are listening to this can't see the video, but you even just seeing your faces light up when you talk about the possibilities in education is really wonderful. So even though it is 8:30 at night, thank you for still remaining so passionate. I just wanted to touch on one thing that you talked about, Beck, in terms of leadership. Do you think that the notion of leadership is changing, especially in schools? Do you think that now there is more of a focus on some of those more self-reflective skills and those, if you like, those softer skills?
I don't know how true my answer would be of all states or systems globally, but from the experience that I've seen, there's like a two sort of pronged pathway. There's one where it is definitely going back down that path of instructional leadership, where we want our principals in classrooms working with teachers, sharing that, detailed knowledge and experience that they have from their career, which means those people, those leaders, remaining upskilled and curious and continuing their own lifelong learning. And then there's another prong, which is just a systemic issue where it's become administrative, completely administrative with heavy workload. And we know this is true. It's come out of the Gallup inquiry, or the Gallup report, I should say, sorry. And the huge workload that is put onto principals and responsibility that goes on principals at the moment too. So it really depends on the experience they have. I know some sisters have the training programs, to prepare principals and induction programs as well for principals too. But the fact is, it just will depend on your school context and your school culture and what the focus is as to which way you're able to go down those pathways, or if you can try and find a way for them to merge, because, and that's just the way it is at this point. So I think we'll see things now with, different unions and stuff trying to take a stand against the workload that we're seeing. But like from my point, like I really want to focus on teaching and learning. I know how much workload there is in the red tape admin background as well too. And some days it's all about the admin just because it just has to be. But then there's other days when, you get to the teaching and learning and you get to do the stuff that feels really, really good, and it makes you miss being in the classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. Stephen, would you, do you have a similar view with your context down in Melbourne?
Yeah, I don't know. Like the research would tell us instructional leadership has been like a thing for 20 years. And the phrase, I think the article used was something like, and the door to the classroom still remains firmly shut to most leadership. And I think that's kind of, that's something like Beck and myself would be trying to push against, I guess. But it's still difficult, because the joy of teaching is it's impossible to tell what good and bad is. And that's kind of, for me especially, like that was my Cambodian experience. We go over there with our preconceived idea. A class is 25, you go over there, they've got a class of 80. It's like everything throw that out the window. And there's a different approach. There's a different way of doing things, and everything's contextual. So, we would all, as leaders, go on learning walks, and you sit in the back of someone's class and you think, oh, that's not how I would do it. And they're probably looking at your class thinking that's not how I would do it. Mm-hmm. And there's no right in there in the middle. Mm-hmm. But as Bec speaks to as well, like leadership needs to become, like, it needs to be a multi-person show. You need your person that, is across the policies, who's a manager first, and they're writing calendars, doing all those sort of administrative things, if that's their strength. And then you need someone who's doing the instructional leadership part. You need someone who's doing sort of transformational leadership, developing other leaders, contingency plans. Like it's a patchwork of ideas. And yeah. And as Bec says, it's all about reflecting and working out, what is your strength and how can you contribute? And that's something I think the two of us have tried to do in a global sense, but that's just as true in a school setting as it is in a classroom setting. Who are your leaders? Who has the strong voice? Who has the skill sets? And how can you use them together?
Yeah. I think Stephen, you raised so many really important points there, and for me personally, one of the most transformative things that I have done in my career was to go and do my the Masters of Instructional Leadership down in Melbourne, and that really got me out of my bubble. I'm a proud New South Wales teacher, but of course we have blinkers on, and there's things that we don't. There's things that we just accept that are normal. And for me, actually going to a different educational context, getting to see some amazing teaching, and go around some wonderful schools in Melbourne, and also really study with some incredible. I learned from some amazing lecturers. It really got me to start to look outside of my own context and go, okay, and actually ask some of those questions. And I imagine that would be such a valuable thing to do as you are going to other countries and seeing teaching practice and observing and contributing to that. But so what do you think is important then? And we might start with Bec and then come back to Stephen. There's so many different styles of leadership. There's so many different ways of doing things. So what do you think makes a great educator? We might go to Bec first. What are the important things? It's a big question.
Reflection has to be the biggest thing. Reflection and willingness to learn and to grow. I read Brene Brown's Dare to Lead book, which has a task in it where you nut out your two values. Yeah. And it's really hard to do. And the two that came out for me were growth and responsibility. And I think for me, being a teacher and a leader, I feel responsible for the students and for the teachers and for the community that I work in. But it's always about growth. It's not about everyone reaching the same mark. That could be students and teachers. We've got beginning teachers, experienced teachers. I work with a teacher who has been a teacher for, I think, 30 plus years, and she still reflects and grows and changes. Wow. We hear people saying that, they get stuck in their ways and then they, ride out to retirement, and she is the absolute opposite of that definition. And that's what I love seeing in teachers. And I hope that I support that as one of the leaders in the school, is that, that growth is something for her too. And I'd like to think that I'd be doing that still, even after 30 years in teaching. Yeah. So I think just being able to reflect and grow and change, because, like I said before about, curriculum and content, we're professional and experts enough to be able to handle anything they throw at us in terms of those changes. Yeah. But if you can't reflect on yourself to adapt what you're doing to suit your kids' needs, I think that would be a point where you go, well, am I really doing the best I can as their teacher?
Absolutely. Recently, my principal put me on to, or encouraged me very strongly to read the Dare to Lead book by Brene Brown.
It's good. Yeah.
Oh, it's good. And look, I say read. I've got it on Audible. I don't know if I can say that I've read it, but it's amazing. And I've actually had to stop it a number of times and actually go and implement some of the things it was talking about, because there's just so much in there. But it's incredibly powerful, and so I look forward to getting to that bit that you talked about
it's hard. Take your time.
Well, I'm not emotionally ready for it, but I'll look back and let you know how I go. But Stephen, what about you? What's important, do you think, and what are some of the things that great teachers do?
Well, firstly, as an English teacher, let me just bless your audio book listening and to tell you it's legitimate. I've
Can I
been
say
doing
I've
that
read
all
it
week
if
to
I've
people.
listened to it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Great.
Since baby arrived, my book goal fell in the toilet. But I've as soon as I went to audiobooks, I was like, okay, I'm back on track. So I highly recommend everyone does that. Put it on double speed, triple speed, get it happening. Maybe not for Dare to Lead, which is asking you to reflect. You probably don't want to do that in hyper speed. But yeah, I would say the two things, passion and reflection. For the last couple of months, I've been doing a little bit of, lecturing or talking to teachers to be, baby teachers. And it's a big discussion point among our politicians, especially, is kind of the idea that our student teachers need to be highly knowledgeable. They need to pass all these literacy and numeracy tests. But I think, while that's at a certain point, that's true, that if you have the passion, and working with the students that I'm working with now, I'm not exactly sure what their ATAR was, but I could tell you the ones that are going to be great teachers, irregardless of that, based on their passion. And then, so you need enough passion to survive, the first 5 years where close to half our teachers drop out. And then reflection becomes super important as well. So if you've got enough passion to get you over that hurdle, then it's all about reflection. And, because we all know that teacher who just, this is how I teach, this is the PowerPoint I use, I've used it every year, I blow the dust off the overhead projector that I use, or whatever it is. I can't even remember what the technology is called. It's escaped me. Yeah. The rotoscope or whatever. And I still use the same transfers, and I draw on them, and they love it every time. You would hope that there's less of that, and that reflection is part of the way to stop that happening. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's it. Just took me back to primary school, when my job was to change the overhead projector slide, and I'd always get it back to front for some reason. Usually for some reason I have a memory of doing it during a Christmas hymn or something, and just the whole hall just breaking up in spontaneous laughter and feeling absolutely mortified. But so I'm traumatized by overhead projectors, but it's sad to know that some people are still using them. I hope that trend is going away.
You can still use them for really cool silhouette activities if you're spelling out some CVC words.
Yeah. I've actually used them for art, but I did start to get a bit nervous when I saw one in the storeroom at school, because it just brought back a rush of emotions from primary school for me. So Stephen, what are some of the things then, like you talked about working with great teachers? What are some of the indicators that you say, yeah, they're going to be a great teacher? You talked about reflection. Are there any other qualities that you go, yeah, I reckon they're going to be able to make it in this profession and contribute something meaningful?
I don't know how to describe how you notice it, but it's definitely it's passion. It's indescribable. You can just tell. We did just 2 weeks ago. We did a little session. Not surprisingly, I had to make a video, which is back it up is something we do quite often, and I feel that's part of the reflective process. There were a whole number of students who basically said, "Oh, I'm not sharing my video, but I recorded 3, and they were very boring." And I'm considering it from my students' perspective and realizing, oh, I'm boring to listen to, and that to me is that's a lack of passion being visible. And there's a lot of people that are passionate but can't communicate that yet, and that's something that we need to learn as teachers, to sort of sell that kind of idea that this is interesting. What we're learning about is exciting. Believe me, even though I've taught it for 10 years and I could tell you every single scene, describe it picture by picture. But yeah, definitely passion. And I'm not exactly sure how to spot it. I know how to spot it, but I don't know how to describe it when I see it.
Yeah.
And when I don't see it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Bec, is there a teacher that has really had a positive impact on your life? You don't have to name them, but I'd just be fascinated to hear about how that teacher made you feel, or what impact they had on your life.
As in my own teacher throughout my schooling?
Yes. So sorry, that was a terribly worded question. What's a teacher in your schooling that has made a difference in your life?
I was fortunate to have lots of amazing teachers, very creative teachers, very inspirational teachers. I'm going to give the shout out though, Mr. Field. I still can't call him by his first name because I respect him too much. I know his name is Paul, but I'm even friends with him on Facebook. He's retired now. It's fine. I'm allowed to say his first name, but I can't. It's Mr. Field. And he was starting high school. He was his social studies, or social sciences, whatever we're going to call it. Is he now? It was geography to start off with, but then for year 11 and 12, he was my legal studies teacher, and law was such a passion subject for me at the time. I loved it. And he was just one of those teachers that was authentic. He was honest and open about making mistakes, about life changes. He made the classroom a safe place for us to make mistakes and have really deep and honest conversations and argue with him about things, especially when it comes to the law and you're a 17-year-old kid and you want to fight the system from your portable classroom in your high school. He would happily have that conversation. And I still remember lessons where it was the class, there was probably only 8 of us doing legal studies at the time, and we would be debating these things, and he would only sort of jump into the conversation where I guess guidance was necessary for. So there were some lessons I think that were predominantly student talk, and we know that that's what's really effective in our lessons for student autonomy and student understanding, in just a way that supported that learning. So that's something that's resonated with me for so long, and I like to think that's what I take back to the classroom as well. Remembering those experiences is I try and go in with that honest approach with my kids. If I stuff up, I made a mistake, guys. Here's how I'm going to learn from it. It's okay to make mistakes. Same approach I take with the kids, and just being authentic about, why we're doing what it is we're doing, and the reality of everything going on around us, whether it's life or the learning that's in the classroom as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you still can't call him So you have to keep calling him Mr. Field.
Mr. Field, yeah.
I feel the same. I went to a tiny primary school in England, and my teacher was a lady called Miss Jones. She's called Beth, but I still can't call her Beth. And we're friends on Facebook, and I went back and saw her a couple of years ago visiting relatives over in England, and I sort of awkwardly gave her a hug. I don't know why. I don't know what came up with me. I was a grown man. I just felt it would be appropriate to give my quite small teacher a cuddle. It's very weird, and I still couldn't call her Beth. She goes, "No, you don't have to call me Miss Jones." I'm like, no, but I do. Like, you're my teacher. You'll always be my teacher. Like, I can't. It's interesting, isn't it? The impact that that great educators have on our lives. Like, it really is transformative. And I know that I was going through a really challenging time with our family at that point. The family was separating, but I knew that every single time I went into her classroom, I knew that I was seen, and I knew that I was valued. And I don't remember what I learned in her class, but I remember how she made me feel, and that and my hope is that as educators, we can all be that to somebody. But I'm getting very philosophical. But, Stephen, what about you? What's a teacher that has had a significant impact in your life, and why?
Well, I'm glad you two spoke beforehand, because it's given me time to prepare. If you had asked me this,
we've gone off the questions a bit this evening, so thank you.
No, that's good. No, because it's like, I was like, gosh, I don't have that strong a memory of my primary school. But then as you're talking, I'm like, Mr. Gower, Miss Cuthbertson. I remember these names, and it's like that was like about 30 years ago. So it's pretty, to me, it's surprising that I remember those names. I think one of my primary school teachers that I really loved, I think I ended up teaching her children as well. So I was able to kind of do that reverse thing, and she'd kind of turn up and be like, "Hi," and I'd be like, "Hi, miss," and then it was this weird kind of, "How's it going?" "Good. Yeah, I remember you. Yep, I know." And kind of, as
you don't want
a
to
young
write
teacher,
anything bad in that report comment.
Were you a naughty student? Is that why she giving you the side eye?
Great question.
No, I think I was all right. I think I was, she might have pulled me up. I think I was probably 2 minutes walk from the school. So we might have broken a couple of windows, playing cricket or something like that. And might have had to own up to her or something like that. I'm sure there's some trauma that I could tease out for you, but there's something there.
Kolber kid again.
I just remember that parent-teacher interview just being like, oh, I've really got the hang of this parent-teacher interview thing. And it's like your primary school teacher that you really respect turns up, and you're like, oh, I'm 5 again. Here we are. Okay. Like, so his scores are, hi miss, how you doing? You doing good? Yeah, I don't know. And then just at high school, I just remember like at one point kind of, going to see a teacher and knocking on the door and kind of pushing it open and seeing a staff room, and the teachers were just like having such a fiery debate and having such a good time that I was kind of had this real sense of like that would be a cool place to be. That would be a nice experience to be a part of. And then kind of it's proven to be true years later, I guess.
Yeah, really. It's really interesting, isn't it? How, and it definitely makes me think about what is the impact that I'm having on my students, and my hope is that if I could have a small proportion of the impact that someone like Miss Jones had on my life, then I will retire very happy. And it's just I love hearing stories like that, because it's such a precious reminder of the incredibly a personal role that we play as educators. We get the opportunity to shape the lives and the minds of the next generation of leaders, and so it's a huge privilege. And I know as a dad, at some point I'm going to kiss my girls goodbye and they're going to skip off to school, and my hope is that they will have a teacher that is just that little bit like Miss Jones, that makes a real difference in their lives. But it's really look, we're part of a really, at the moment it's quite an unusual part in the education. So let me rephrase that. Hopefully I can edit that out. It's quite an unusual time, I think, at the moment in education, especially in terms of what's happening with the COVID-19 pandemic, the ongoing pandemic that it is. Bec, what do you think? What impact do you think that has had on education? And do you think we are going to bounce back to quote unquote normal, or is this the new normal?
I think that from this, our kids have demonstrated that they can be really resilient through this kind of thing. And you see that when you get new kids, refugee students that come into the classroom that have been in war-torn countries for 2+ years, and they just slot into the classroom and start learning. Quite grateful to be in a classroom. I think our kids are going to be grateful to come back, even the ones that are normally like, oh, I don't want to go to school again. They're going to be so happy to come back and be in that classroom and be in that safe, comfortable environment where they can see their friends. I think there will be a gap, but I think our teachers are highly skilled and will find the best way they can to support their kids and be able to get them back. I have 100% confidence that our teachers have the skills to do everything they need to get kids to where they need to be, and they'll do that in the time frame that suits that child. I have no concerns about that whatsoever. I do have concerns about the impact it's had on teacher wellbeing in this time, though, because we see the conversations having, whether it's online or in person, and I'm not referring to any particular conversation I've had, these are just ones that I'm aware of, is that teachers are very aware of the fact that they've been a little part of this conversation throughout the pandemic. We hear lots about that we're essential workers, and that education needs to continue, and then we don't really hear about what measures are in place to support teachers for that. We hear about what's going on for kids. We hear about, how we're going to, the COVID support programs and what's going to be in measures for them, and how important it is for kids to be protected when they go back. And teachers don't seem to be part of that conversation, and they know. So my concern would be, how do we support the people who will be supporting the kids? I don't want teachers to feel like they're squished between the rock and the hard place, even though we're being told how essential and critical we are during this time. So I am very concerned we're going to lose teachers at the end of this if we go back and they still feel completely devalued, or if we've had some of those beginning teachers, baby teachers, I would like to take that phrase on, please. I'm very concerned that their passion or their drive or their well-being just was squashed to the point where they can't continue anymore, and we lose wonderful educators.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think you raised some incredible points there. Stephen, what about yourself? What do you think about what are some of the impacts of this pandemic, and do you think we will bounce back to previous ways of thinking, or are you optimistic that we can learn from this?
depends on the day that you ask me.
Time.
I get asked this question a lot, but I would
And the
say
week and the term. Yeah.
in the majority of things will bounce back to normal. I think it's easy for a lot of rhetoric to be, we're all about innovating and things get better and we use technology and all these sort of things. But, I think in Victoria, we're up to like 156 days of online learning, remote learning delivery, whatever we're calling it. And I think it's safe to say that it's not it. That's not the solution. And I think, like, if you had asked me, online learning, video, all those sort of things that we do as kind of tech-forward teachers, is that the thing? I think there would have been people standing around in a conference being like, "This is it. We've found a solution." And now, for me at least in Victoria, we've all done it. And yeah, this is not the thing. This is not the solution. No one's closing schools and going, you know what? This whole hanging out with peers and talking to teachers and having that face to face. I think we're going back to that, and I think that's really important. And I think a little bit it will, I hope, kind of insulate us against that kind of being too futuristic focused and sort of being like, schools are like factories. It's like, well, in a way, yeah, but if a room full of people is like a factory, then yeah, totally, schools are like factories. So yeah, I would say small things will change, like parent-teacher interviews, I think will mostly be online. There's a fair few staff meetings that could absolutely survive as a Zoom meeting.
It is an email now, isn't it?
It is an email, exactly. Even the thing of like the idea that you could record a staff meeting, like that was not even something that was possible or thought of. And I know at my school, like a couple of times, people have been like, could we get the swivel out and record this staff meeting? Someone's away, they want to watch it after the fact. And that's not something that ever would have happened pre-COVID, because like that's quite a bizarre idea. It's like, well, you weren't there, so you didn't see it. But I think, yeah, the technology that all us teachers have learned how to do, and my hope is always, as it has been since we started making YouTube videos for students and teachers and whoever, is that skill set is kind of important and relevant, even pre, post, during COVID, whatever you call it, remote learning, face-to-face. There's still a place for that sort of thing to have leverage. So I'd hope that would continue. But yeah, as Bec said, it's something needs to change about the teacher element within our society, because the amount of times that, and as a Victorian, we've had 100 million different restrictions and updates and press conferences, and most people sit there for the first 5 minutes, hear what's happening and go about their day. Teachers are there for the full two hours going, okay, but so how does that relate to me as a teacher? And I've never really been directly addressed, but if schools are back, does that mean I'm back? And if my kids are back, am I back? Or if only some of them are? Like, it's yeah, after that brief little bump in popularity where I was like, hey, teachers are amazing. And then like 2 weeks later, I was like, well, I wish my kid was back in school. So could we send the teachers back, please? Yeah, so until that's repaired, the sort of our role within society, I don't think anything dramatically is going to change, but there will be some sort of improvements around the edges, and definitely the skill development of teachers has been pretty incredible to see. Yeah, everyone sort of jumped into the future overnight almost. So
hasn't it put the silly argument to rest of, oh, teachers will become obsolete one day, it'll all be online? No, that will never happen.
That's what I'm saying. We really thought that for a bit there. We were like, oh, we could. It's like, what if we pulled all the YouTube videos of all the amazing teachers in the world? You wouldn't even need a teacher. We'll just get Eddie Wu, we'll get Bec, we'll get Steve, we'll get Matt, we'll get everyone in it. We'll put all the videos online. And that's like, yeah, no. There's
something I really hope that gets addressed beyond this, and I don't know how we do this other than nagging, but the whole I don't know what we call it, technology poverty. I don't know if that's what we call this. Is surely this has highlighted the fact that not every family has access to the internet, to technology. And I'm not even just talking like rural and remote communities that like physically don't have access to it. I'm talking about in our metro communities, in our low socioeconomic areas, where families would rather pay for milk and bread and cereal than internet for their phone. And that's just because that's what the situation is. And that could be a poverty cycle. That could be because they're fleeing domestic violence. They're new refugees. People seem to think that these communities get payouts, and it's really not how that works. And when it came to us going online, we had the restriction this lockdown that we weren't allowed to hand out packs. So like last year, the families could come down and social distance and sign and pick up a device or pick up a learning pack. And this time it was no one on site. You need to mail stuff out. So we've got kids, families of up to 5 that we couldn't loan them a device because they don't have internet at home, and we couldn't get dongles and all those sorts of things. So we have to mail out our work 3 weeks in advance because Australia Post is just so inundated with everything now. That's how far in advance we have to plan the work that we're doing for these kids. But it also means we can't see what work they're doing if they can't upload work for us to see and monitor. So we're pretty much on the phone kind of going, so what did you write down for page 3, like really that's, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if there's some kind of way that we can provide this for families when they begin their education, because even if we want to go down that future path of things like flipped learning, if we want to provide them with technology to watch the videos prior to coming into the class and have those really good, Socratic conversations around learning, they need to be given that stuff to be able to do it. And it's going to increase this horrible cycle where they just don't have access to that wonderful learning other than at school.
Yeah. Bec, you raise so many important points. I mean, I'm working in a different school context to you now, but I know for many years I was working just down the road to where your wonderful school is, and going online and doing remote learning in southwestern Sydney is very, very different, I think, to anything that I've experienced going online again in another school context. It really is a very unique place, and there's so many issues and challenges, and I think it raises so many concerns around equity and access to things like technology and learning. And I think that teachers have done and will continue to do an amazing job, do whatever we can to engage our students. And it's really, it's so inspiring to hear, and especially to hear the work that teachers are doing down in Melbourne, Stephen, that common goal and thread of doing whatever we can to make sure our students are learning is incredibly inspiring. And teachers are amazing. We are, it sounds like I'm arrogant, but we are an amazing group of people that education has transformed our lives, and what a privilege it is to get to do that for the lives of other people. And guys, I did promise that I would wrap up by 9 o'clock so that you can go to your families. But I just wanted to say from the bottom of my heart, I'm incredibly grateful that you would take the time to talk with me this evening. And congratulations again for everything that you are doing. And I think the Global Teacher Prize nomination is so well deserved. And thank you for representing us on the global stage. It's a huge privilege to speak to you. But Bec, just in closing, where can people find out more about you? And then we'll come back to you, Stephen.
So I'm on Twitter under Bec West 81. I'm on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube under Talkin Chalk. If you'd like to look at younger kids' videos, learning videos, that's on Clever Pickles. So there's some maths and handwriting predominantly, and some other random things that I chuck on there as well. But if you're within my system in New South Wales, you'll know how to find me on the global network when you search up our names and see where I am. If you want to contact me via email, I always respond to anyone who contacts me with invitations, and I will say yes or no depending on what my priorities are at the time.
Thank you for saying yes. What about you, Stephen? Where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, well, it's probably quicker to say where they can't. I'm not on Snapchat, and that's about it, really.
You should be.
If you Google my name and exclude the more famous Stephen Kolber, then you're probably on the right track. YouTube channel, Mr. Kolber's teaching, stephenkolber.com, which I learned how to make a website for some reason, mostly to learn how to make a website. But yeah, I'm in a lot of places, and later this week I'll be at the ASIL conference if anyone wants to swing by. Obviously, you're not going to publish this overnight, so it's irrelevant likely at this point anyway. But yeah, I'm around.
Fantastic. We have to shout out the Teachers Across Borders, because I don't think you actually said the name earlier. So that's Absolutely. What Stephen does when he works with those teachers overseas. Teachers Across Borders. They're on Twitter as well, yes?
Yeah, Teachers Across Borders Australia. There's a US one, there's a Sweden one as well. At the moment, we're moving into a hiatus as we wait to, be able to leave the country, because we're currently teachers very much confined within borders and local government areas, which isn't as
Teachers
catchy a
within
name.
borders, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll be bouncing back at some point in the near future and returning to cross borders.
So you just need a little asterisk in there. Teachers waiting to go across borders.
That's it. Yeah.
Well, I'll make sure that I put all this information so that everyone can stay in contact with you and also see your work. But thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today, and congratulations again. We're all so proud of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to the Art of Teaching podcast today. I hope that you, like me, got some valuable insights out of our discussion. For show notes, please visit theartofteachingpodcast.com. I've one favour to ask. If you could please head to the iTunes page of the podcast and rate and review the episode. This would really help to get the interviews and resources to as many people as possible. Also, I've created a private Facebook group so that we can continue the discussion after each episode. The link is in the show notes. Thank you again for listening, and until next time.